Welcome back. So I apologize for being late. Our closed session ran a little bit longer. Madam Clerk.
Item 18 is from the Planning Department to adopt an ordinance amending the zoning of real property in Calaveras County from rural residential RR5 to residential agriculture RA for Jed Richardson. This item will be continued to a future meeting date to allow for the full board to be present.
Okay, before we start, I'd like to make a statement. I'd like to disclose that I viewed the video of the public hearing held on July 25th in its entirety, and I fully reviewed all evidence received during my absence on the last board meeting when this was discussed on county business in Columbus, Ohio. Further, the public should be aware that generally, when a public hearing has been closed, which it was on the 25th, no further comments or evidence are received at subsequent meetings unless it is recommended that the public hearing be reopened. The public hearing on the 25th was in fact closed, and the continuance was merely for deliberations and action by the board as a whole. So unless it is recommended by staff and the board takes action to formally reopen the hearing, no further comments or evidence will be received on this matter today or at the continued date. This is consistent with Rules 21 and 27 of the Board Rules and Procedures. Since we don't have a full board today, I would like to call for a motion to continue this matter again so the board as a whole can deliberate and take action on this hearing heard on the 25th.
Chair, I would make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Garamendi.
Mr. Chair,
comment?
Yes, please. We would request that it be continued to a date certain, if that's possible. That would prevent us from having to renotice it, but by continuing to a date certain, it provides the public the notice here that of the specific date of when it would be heard.
It's my understanding we will have a full board here on the August 22nd meeting. Is it preferable that I say motion would be to bring this forward at that meeting?
To continue it to the
August 22nd.
Yes, please.
Is there a different date that you have in mind?
That works fine for us. We're ready to go. There was some additional information that was requested that we're prepared to provide to the board at that date, and we're ready to go.
And you will notify the applicant of that date?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Staff, question for staff. Is there any problem making that time, that date for this agenda item? Okay. Everybody understand the motion and the second?
Thank you.
Any further public comment?
It's just a request for clarification. I thought the chair said that on the 22nd that all the comment, everything that's been presented thus far, that would be the end of it in its totality, and you were there just to come up with a decision. Okay, and then I thought I heard Mr. Maurer say that he has more information he's going to be supplying the board. So would that be, which way is it supposed to be? If the new information is coming forward, then shouldn't the public have a chance to respond to that new information?
I'm going to ask Mr. Maurer to respond to that question you have, Mr. McManus.
Okay,
New information issue?
There was a request by at least one board member for some additional information regarding, I believe, water and the history of the subdivision of that property. And so that's the information we'll be bringing back. So I believe that would be considered new information. I think that you may be able to limit the testimony to that new information and not have to rehear the entire item, but just to respond to that new information.
County Counsel.
If staff recommends the hearing be reopened, the board can reopen the hearing for that limited purpose of receiving the new testimony. There would be an opportunity for the public to comment on that new testimony, and then the public hearing would be closed again, and then that would close all evidence at that point. For purposes of today, there's no evidence to be presented to this board since it's not a full body, so that can be heard on the 22nd as far as reopening the hearing to receive the evidence at that time.
Counsel, would that be a board decision or board chair decision to hear that evidence?
Board decision.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment on this before the vote's asked? Seeing none? Been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 4-0, one absent.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Item 19 is from the Building Department to authorize the CAO to execute an agreement with Superion to develop and implement a new electronic permit tracking system in the amount not to exceed $450,810, not to exceed 60 months from the date of execution.
Good afternoon, Chair Oliveira and Board.
Sure. How are you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say at the last previous board meeting, we pulled this item and came back on subsequently a date. The board allowed us to go back and renegotiate the contract, fix a few things with the vendor that has been completed and is in front of you as the contract presented and signed. With that said, we are here to ask the county exec to execute an agreement with Superion to develop and implement a new system, permit tracking system with a lot of whistles and bells that will not exceed the $450,810 as articulated in the staff report. The cost will be very similar to what we're paying today with the old system as we're going along. So it's a really discounted rate. A little bit of history on the Permit Plus system. As you know, if you've probably heard of Moore's Law, technology changes, increases in half, and cost goes down in speed. Well, this system's nearly 20 years old, and it's obsolete, and it's not even supported anymore. So we're trying to move to the 21st century and tracking not only permit systems, but eradications, code violations, a broad-based full enterprise system that's going to go across the whole land use system and has a variety of other future modules like business licensing in the future we can do. It's a new system that'll allow even electronic documents, online systems, everything you can think of to bring a enhanced, probably exemplary customer service experience, which also will ultimately make us more efficient and effective in the end run. Right now, that old system is just antiquated and kind of hopping along. With that said, we would like to articulate also that we started, as the project scope says in there, we had a kickoff meeting with the governance team, which is the steering committee, which includes the county exec, Tim, and the department heads, and we're going to continue to adjust from there, create some cross-functional teams, try to do a grassroots, because buy-in is very important to a new system as we're going to it. So we're going to be able to implement this in a fashionable way, but it's going to take some time, probably more than a year to 18 months, as you see in the staff report. So we're here to ask for the approval of this project as is submitted to you.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Questions of Mr. Short by the board? Supervisor Mills.
Mr. Short, I have to applaud you for taking the steps so quickly. You are familiar with the system,
Yes.
and so is this something could be used across other departments in assisting them with data?
Oh, absolutely. That's what this will be, an enterprise-wide system.
So we could cross-migrate into the other departments, maybe not right away, but over time?
Over time, yes, but
And-
we're going to implement the land use department heads. We have buy-in and the steering committee that includes environmental health, public works, planning, the building and code. So we're starting there and interfacing as we go along. It's a large enterprise-wide system that can be used across the board.
Excellent. So your thoughts is you'll be able to bring it to a basic functional status within, what, 6 months, or?
Well, it'll probably be a year to 18 months, but this is the core first phase.
Right.
Because it takes quite a bit to do a lot of data conversion, get things up and running. You know, we're going to create the requirements from a grassroots effort, so we want people to make this system work for us at Calaveras County. So we want to make sure it fits our needs and exceeds them. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but the staff is excited. I think the leadership's excited. I think we're all excited to move on into the 21st century with technology.
And so doing training programs for functionality is already built into what your plans are here?
Yes, sir. There will be some training. If you look in the scope there,
Yeah, I
we
saw it on
have a
the
phase
scope.
plan. We're bringing consultants on board that will help us with that. Also, we have some internal staff. We're going to make this a successful project.
That question was just for the public.
Right. Oh, okay. That's okay. Not a problem.
So, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Short. This program cost originally is around $406,000.
Right.
And then funding is going to be through a revenue stream of the building fees.
Correct. It'd be,
Is our building fee schedule sufficient to cover that type of expense?
yes, sir. And as we go through the rest of the year, we're going to amortize that and have some fair share costs with different departments on some of the user license, ongoing annual maintenance, stuff like that. This is the initial cost, and then we're going to have the annual maintenance and user fees as we escalate up. Those costs will be do a fair share type of thing, and maybe Tim can assess to that a little bit more.
If I was going to say, if I could just add to that piece, there is within building a designated fund that has accumulated enough money to fund this project. The funds are set aside for just this type of an endeavor, a capital project infrastructure upgrade. So that's the bulk of where the startup costs are going to come from. That way it allows all the data migration, training, all those startup pieces that you normally wouldn't have on a recurring basis. Then once it gets operational, that's when we'd start to look at, right now, departments, public works, environmental health, planning, each that would have an element to it that are paying for the current system, wouldn't be paying for the current system and instead paying for this system. So and I think it's important to note, because this will not turn around and impact the fees that we're collecting now in terms of raising the fee to pay for this. It's already been calculated in our obsolescence type of a designated fund to cover this type of a cost.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Further questions by the board of Mr. Short? I'll open it up to public comment. Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Clapp.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Mills. Once again, no public discussion on this. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 4-0, one absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Madam Clerk.
Item 20 is from the Sheriff's Office to ratify County Administrative Office approval, revising the capital equipment spending plan to the not exceed amount of $33,000 capital expense allocation approved by the board on the July 11, 2017 meeting.
Morning, or afternoon, Sheriff.
Good afternoon. You had questions about the vehicle, the OHV vehicle, or do you want me to just tell you about it?
I have no questions. Better ask the rest of the board members, though.
Is it bigger than your bicycle?
It's bigger than my bicycle. I guess one of the questions that came up was we got an original bid of $19,000 to replace the motor in this vehicle. Once the vehicle was taken down to the shop to be repaired, the cost went up to $24,000, and there was some question on that. Again, the original estimate was sight unseen. This is a 2008 vehicle that had 150,000 miles, or has 150,000 miles on it. I don't know if you're familiar with the 6.0 Ford motors. They have a tendency to go kablooey. Well, this one did, and when they originally estimated it, the cost of the motor is $14,000 alone. Once it got down to the shop, they found that the intercooler, and I don't know how familiar you are with motors, but the intercooler is what cools the air as it goes into the motor. It has oil that runs through it, and when the motor died, it in turn contaminated that intercooler and other parts within the vehicle, so it had to be replaced, so there's an additional cost. Those particular vehicles, in order to replace that motor, the cab has to come off the chassis. So once they do that, there's some wiring that has to be replaced. So there was an added cost. These are all state funds. This is allocated to the state through our OHV program. We had some units. We purchased a new quad this past year, and part of this $33,000 was going to purchase a set of snow tracks for one of the pieces of equipment that we purchased. In talking to the state, we pulled back those tracks so that there was the extra money available to repair the motor in this vehicle. To replace a Ford vehicle, it's a it's a 1-ton truck. To replace that truck right now is probably about $55,000 to $60,000, and we felt that $20,000 was a heck of a lot cheaper. Again, no cost to the county, nothing out of the general fund. This is just some monies that were shifted around within our OHV program.
I did have a question, but you answered it.
That's what I'm here for.
There you go. Any further questions of the sheriff by board? Seeing none? Any public comment? Hearing none? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Mills. I'll second it. Seconded by Supervisor Clapp. Once again, no public comment. Call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 4-0, 1 absent. Thank you, Sheriff.
Item 21 is from Public Works to approve a resolution to adopt the mitigated negative declaration for Dogtown Road over French Gulch Bridge replacement project.
Is there a representative from Public Works who'd like to present? Obviously. I'll bring it back to the board. Any discussion by the board?
The item's pretty straightforward, Chair.
Okay. Any further discussion? Any public comment? I'll come back and call for now a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Clapp.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Mills. Once again, a request for public comment. Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 4-0, 1 absent. Madam Clerk.
Item 22 is from Public Works to authorize the board chair to execute the Second Amendment between Calaveras County and Far Western Anthropological Research Group, Incorporated, to the Professional Services Agreement for Monitoring and Treatment Plan and Archaeological Monitoring for Unanticipated Cultural Resources Discoveries during construction of Railroad Flat Bridge over Esperanza Creek Project, Federal Aid Number BRLS 5930037, for an additional amount of $53,037.96 and a not to exceed amount of $81,211.91 and a term ending December 31st, 2017.
Okay, is there any presenter from Public Works on this item? Seeing none, board discussion. Supervisor
Chair, do
Garamendi.
you want to continue this till someone from Public Works can
I
show up?
messaged Public Works and Mr. Krovitz is on his way right now.
Okay, then,
I mean,
having light of that, we're going to table this item until he arrives, or is he on the way now?
He's on his way now.
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute break then.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back in session. Madam Clerk, do we want to read the agenda item, and Mr. Krovitz is present?
Okay, so item 22 is from Public Works to authorize the board chair to execute the Second Amendment between Calaveras County and Far Western Anthropological Research Group, Incorporated, to the Professional Services Agreement for Monitoring and Treatment Plan and Archaeological Monitoring for Unanticipated Cultural Resources discoveries during construction of Railroad Flat Bridge over Esperanza Creek project, federal aid number BRLS 5930037, for an additional amount of $53,037.96 and a not to exceed amount of $81,211.91 and a term ending December 31st, 2017.
Thank you. Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. The Railroad Flat Bridge on Railroad Flat Row is currently under construction as part of the Highway Bridge Program. The environmental document that was approved for the project required monitoring for endangered species and cultural resources as part of the mitigated negative declaration. That was to guarantee that impacts would be less than significant through the monitoring program. During construction, we've discovered that there is more work that's needed because there were unanticipated discoveries of unanticipated endangered species, including, I believe, the Sierra yellow-legged frog. It wasn't thought to be out there. And so this item is to expand the scope of work for the required environmental monitoring services during the construction of the project. The majority of this will be funded through the Highway Bridge Program at about 87%, with about 11.5% coming from our RIM fees. And this is an identified project within our RIM fee program.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krovis. Any questions of the board, actually by the board to Mr. Krovis?
Well, the question would be, we have two agenda items for the same bridge here.
Correct.
So we have 13,000 on the other one and 28,000 on this one as additional costs.
Correct.
And your anticipation is this will pretty much solve the issue of the cultural?
Oh, we haven't had issues with the cultural. This is for endangered species.
Archaeological, yeah.
Endangered species.
And that should handle it for you? You don't
Yes.
anticipate anything more?
We don't, but
Okay. When is that bridge scheduled to be finished?
I believe in the spring.
Okay. Thank you.
Schedule shows it a little bit shorter than that, but I'd rather promise later and deliver earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Krovis. Any further questions of Mr. Krovis? We'll open up for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion. Moved by Supervisor Mills, second by Supervisor Clapp. No further public comment, apparently. I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 4-0, one absent. Madam Clerk.
Item 23 is from Public Works to approve a contract change order in the amount of $13,012.93 for the agreement between Calaveras County and KW Emerson for construction of the Railroad Flat Road Bridge Replacement Project, Federal Aid Project BRLS 5930037.
Thank you. Again, Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. Same project as the previous item, but this is a construction change order between the county and the contractor. There are two items driving this particular change order. Number one, our construction manager has made recommendations to include freeze-thaw protection to some of the concrete being poured out there to give us a longer lasting bridge with less susceptibility to crack into freeze-thaw. The designers indicated to us when we asked that this was a very close call, but they did not object to it. We believe that it will be funded and it will give us a longer lasting structure. The second change order is for additions to the traffic handling. I don't know, I'm assuming some of you have driven by it. We have a signalized intersection out there that controls traffic, stops traffic on a three-way intersection at Ware Guard and Railroad Flat. This change order adds additional safety features for a fourth leg from a developed parcel adjacent to the construction site. And so adding this fourth leg allows safe access around the construction site at that fourth leg. So because of the expense the cost of the initial contract. Change orders have to come through board by county purchasing policy.
Thank you, Mr. Crovus. Questions of Mr. Crovus by the board? Seeing none, public comment?
I'm sorry, I missed the question for the last one, but it also goes to the last one. Is this, I imagine these are increases that cost us more, the 13,000, it doesn't say in addition to anything else, but does this money come out of the general fund, or is there another source of revenue for these monies?
Mr. Crovus.
This project is funded out of the Highway Bridge Program, which is funded by Federal Highway Administration, so it's federally funded, to the tune of about 87.4%, requiring a local match of 11.5%, approximately 11.5%. The 11.5% that we are using for our local match is identified out of our RIM fee, our Roadway Impact Mitigation Fund, designated for these types of uses.
Okay. Further public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Discussion or entertain a motion?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Garamendi, second by Supervisor Mills. No further public comment. Call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 4-0, one absent. Madam Clerk.
Item 25 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commissioner's denial of the appeal of the Planning Director's denial of commercial cannabis registration 2016-629 for Stuart Alberts on APN 021-021-005, file number 2016-629.
Council, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the hearing, I want to go over our procedures so everybody understands. We'll have staff presentation and board questions of staff. Then we'll have a presentation by the appellant or by representatives of an appellant. Presentation by members of the public shall be limited to 5 minutes per person. That's during our public comment period. Summation and rebuttal by appellants, a 15-minute time limit for each appellant. Staff summation and rebuttal. Sir rebuttal by members of the public, that's a public comment period again. Board questions to anyone and the appellant. We'll close the appeal hearing, and board discussion and deliberation will take place with no questions from the public. Supervisor Platt.
I'll be recusing myself from this hearing. The Alberts family and my family's been acquaintance for decades, and so I'll be recusing myself.
Thank you, Supervisor Clapp. Supervisor Garamendi.
I'd like to declare that I know both attorneys. I've met and talked to them about general cannabis policy issues in the county. We have not discussed this issue specifically or at all, and therefore I do not feel I need to recuse myself because of past communications.
Okay, thank you very much, Supervisor Garamendi. Council, we can proceed with 3 board members or 2 board members. Are you recusing yourself?
No, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure. We can continue. All right. I'm going to declare the hearing open.
Good afternoon to the Board of Supervisors. This is Miguel with the Calaveras County Planning Department. I'm here to present this appeal 2016
Excuse me, I'm going to ask you to speak real loud.
All right. So once
After
more, this is
reviewing the
Miguel
tapes,
with the
real loud.
Calaveras County Planning Department. I'm here to present appeal 2016-629.
Mr. Chair, pardon my indulgence. Can you indulge me for a minute before we get to the substance of the denial? We have a procedural issue which I brought to the board's attention. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Rick Frimmer. I'm a member of the California Bar. I'm here representing Cali Farms Patient Collective. I wanted to introduce Mr. Stuart Alberts. Stewart, raise your hand. He is actually the appellant. I serve in two capacities today. First, I'm representing as counsel Cali Farms. I'm also the landowner involved, and this is a lease situation, so I wanted to disclose that in advance. My co-counsel is Matt Clark. I think you all know him. Fine local attorney, and he's here. He helped me with this. Just before we get started, I submitted on Friday appeal papers. I assume, and I submitted enough copies so that each of you would have one and counsel would have one. Did they, in fact, arrive safely? I think they did.
I ultimately got my copy yesterday. I believe that the copies for the board were sent to the board clerk. My office has reviewed the two correspondence, and one of the things within the appeal was a request for essentially that the board consider whether the denial at the Planning Commission of a request for continuance was proper or not. And before we get into the merits of the appeal, this board may want to consider bifurcating this hearing and hear whether a procedural issue, purely the procedural issue of whether you want to uphold the Planning Commission's denial for the continuance or not, and then if it is denied, then move into the actual substance of the appeal hearing before you today. Does that make sense?
It does. As to the issue of the second motion, not motion, that was filed as to the recusing of supervisors?
There was a request for a recusal of two supervisors. It was for a different basis, but Supervisor Clapp ultimately recused himself, as you're aware. The other supervisor in question is not present today, so it should be a non-issue if counsel for the appellant agrees.
I agree. I also agree that although I did state in the papers that I did have a meeting with Supervisor Garamendi on May 2nd, as far as I'm concerned, the issue was not discussed. It was not brought up. It was a generic discussion about county policy, and I agree with Supervisor Garamendi's decision that he is capable of hearing this appeal.
Okay, thank you.
So the recusal issue, I think, is over. I think what we're referring to is that we believe that there is a substantial due process issue that occurred at the Planning Commission. And so it might be a good idea to get that, to have a hearing on that first before we actually get to the substance of the appeal. And I think that's what counsel was referring to. And with your indulgence, I'd like to actually request that you do so.
Okay. That's my understanding, that we will address that issue first before getting into the contents of the hearing. Did you have comments? Yes, Madam Clerk.
So I just wanted to note for the record that we did receive, my office did receive the paperwork regarding the recusal, the request to have two supervisors recuse themselves. We only received 3 hard copies, so we scanned it and emailed it to all the supervisors as the, in addition to the appeal paperwork that was received by the planning department. We received 1 copy of that, and so we scanned that and sent it to all of you via email.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we did receive that. I received it. I don't know about my fellow supervisors. Let's discuss the issue of the continuance as per your suggestion. So we're going to close the hearing and go to the issue of continuance. Is that part of what we need to do right now?
It would be a bifurcated hearing. So
Bifurcated
it would be a separate hearing in and of itself as to whether you agree that whether there was a due process issue that the Planning Commission denied the request for continuance at the Planning Commission level or not.
Okay. So we'll open that hearing up. You can present, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Once again, I'm Rick Frimmer, member of the California Bar. I'm here representing Cali Farms Patient Collective. Cali Farms is an entity which is duly in good standing in the Commonwealth of, in the state of California. Mr. Alberts is the authorized representative. So what this is all about is that, of course, you know the procedures that occur in connection with the applications for approval of cannabis applications. First, the matter comes before the planning director, who I believe is is it Maurer? Did I pronunciation correct? Thank you. And then, depending upon Mr. Maurer's ruling, a hearing is, if the applicant elects to appeal to the Planning Commission, 15-day appeal period is required. If the applicant does appeal, then the Planning Commission has a hearing. The letter of denial in this case, this is 2016-629. I think the clerk identified that, but let me just clarify that for the record. The letter of denial here, which is a single issue letter of denial, it is based upon alleged lack of date stamp photographic evidence. There was no other issue. All the other I's and T's were dotted and crossed. It was dated May 15th, 2017. It is in your packet at number 1. It was received by the applicant, and a timely notice of appeal was filed on May 30th. It is in your packet at application 2. It was hand-delivered, and it was duly stamped. There's no question that the appeal was timely. On June 9th, so that was a few days later, the Planning Commission sent a letter by regular mail, which is probably the usual procedure, scheduling a hearing for June 22nd. Mr. Alberts received that letter in due course by regular mail on the 13th of June, 8 days before the scheduled hearing date. He realized very quickly that he had a prior commitment and could not attend. He phoned me. I had 2 problems. First, I was in the middle of a trial that ended up lasting 2.5 weeks in San Diego. Secondly, June 22nd is my wedding anniversary. I've only been married for a few years. I really didn't want to be away from my wife on my wedding anniversary. So we discussed it, and I asked Mr. Alberts to submit a request for continuance and to personally deliver it to the planning office. He did so on June 19th, 3 days before the hearing date. It was stamped and received. It's in your packet at item 4. We heard nothing back on a request for continuance. The Planning Commission started its hearings at the usual 9 o'clock time, I think, on the 22nd. If you look at the videotape, you'll see that at around 11 o'clock, this case came up. Now, obviously, no one was there. We had filed a request for continuance because no one could be there. The Planning Commission, and I'm sorry, but on the videotape, I don't know the people. Their name tags were not all that visible, so I can't tell you who said what. I can only tell you what was said. It was acknowledged that a request for continuance had been hand-delivered. Now, one of the commissioners actually thought it was emailed, but that was incorrect. It was, in fact, hand-delivered. They spent about 10 minutes discussing the continuance. If you look at the video, you'll see that there's sort of a very interesting discussion. And again, I can't put names to faces because I couldn't read the materials, and not being from the community, I just don't know the people. One of the planning directors remarked, the planning commissioners remarked, well, they've had plenty of time to prepare, and that's good enough. Well, preparation is not what a due process hearing is all about. A hearing means hear. It means the right of the citizen to come and face the administrative body and present oral argument. We never waived oral argument. We asked for continuance. Another one of the planning commissioners basically said, well, we're backed up already, so we might as well just get on with it. A third one noted correctly that, look, it's early in the year. It's not like anybody's trying to game the system here by trying to elongate the process. This hearing was called on 8 days' notice and noted that there was really no harm in it. And that's the point. There would have been no prejudice to the county at all to grant a short continuance. We only asked for 30 days. Interestingly enough, it is almost 6 weeks since that date. That hearing could have been held already, and we might not have had to have this hearing today. I know from watching, I can't say that I've been here before you before, but I've watched most of the videotapes of your meetings this year, and I'm impressed the way you conduct business. I think that due process is something that everybody understands here. I know your council understands it. And I think that in order to preserve the right process here, this continuance should have been granted. There's different standards for presenting evidence before the Planning Commission and before the board. The Planning Commission hears all the evidence and makes a determination. You're rather constrained under your county code. As far as I read 070, it really says that you have discretion to remand to the county based upon new information. I'm not even sure, counsel could correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not even sure that you have the authority to overrule the Planning Commission. If you do, that's fine. I'd like that to happen today. But I think that the proper thing is, and I think that there have been 20 appeals this year. I know that you've denied all of them, so I don't know if there's precedent for remand, but that's what the code says. And in this case, the applicant has, and if you go through the materials, you'll see, a substantial likelihood of prevailing on the merits here. I don't fault Mr. Moorer for denying the application. He did it based upon the evidence that was in the application, which was an incorrect photograph. Mr. Alberts was submitting 3 applications on June 29th of last year. He had them all on the floor. He mixed up his pictures. The picture he put in this application happens to be the picture for next door for his own property. We have other pictures. We also have evidence that earth moving occurred. All of those are in your packet here. If the Planning Commission hears this evidence, I'm almost positive that they will reverse themselves. If not, we'll have a good hearing. But we never had a chance to do this. And I think what will end up happening today, or what could happen, is we'll end up going through the entire substantive hearing, and at the end of the day, if you think there's any merit to it, you'll remand back to the Planning Commission. So I think given that we didn't have a hearing before, there was really no excuse on 8 days' notice. Look, folks, I've been practicing for 40 years. I've practiced extensively before the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service. I'm admitted in 3 states. I've practiced before 18 federal courts. I'm a member of the U.S. Supreme Court. I've had hundreds of administrative appeals in my day, and I have never, in the 40 years I've been doing this, seen a reasonable first-time request for continuance on a scheduled matter that was scheduled by a board on less than 2 weeks' notice, not continued. All we're asking for is, instead of going through what could be a timely process here, and perhaps coming to the conclusion that the new information actually will result in a remand to the Planning Commission, that the sensible and correct legal thing to do is to simply kick it back to the Planning Commission, let us have our hearing, which we were entitled to in the first place, see what happens at the Planning Commission, and we can always come back here if need be. I suspect we won't have to, but if we do have to, I'll be pleased to put a full substantive process on then. Of course, your standards for review are different than the planning standards, the standards that the Planning Commission uses for a hearing on the merits de novo. And so I would ask you first to strongly consider and grant a hearing at the Planning Commission level. I can work with the Planning Department to schedule a date in the reasonably near future. We're ready to go. I mean, the work's already been done. And then see what happens, and we can always come back here. The hearing won't be as long, and at least we'll get the due process stuff out of the way. I know you take this stuff seriously. I do. I know your counsel does. So that's my request. Any questions?
Thank you, Counsel. Any questions? Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you. Mr. Mauer, 8 days is pretty short. What is our standard? What do people normally get? Is that abnormally short by what we do? Or tell me where we fall in the curve.
That is actually the standard for Planning Commission hearings. We are required to provide published notice 10 calendar days prior to the hearing. So we send out the notice to the paper so that it's published at least 10 days prior to, because of the publishing schedule. That's usually the Friday 2 weeks before the hearing. We will then send out written notice to all the surrounding property owners as well as the property owner and the applicant or appellant. And that usually goes out around the same time, and because of the mail schedule that was 8 days, it's probably pretty typical of the time frame.
Is this a common complaint that people seek more time?
We have had several requests for continuances because of scheduling conflicts. And in some cases, the Planning Commission has granted those continuances. In other cases, they have not.
So they haven't consistently said no.
I have to take it in. circumstances.
Supervisor, can I interject at this point? Sure. I forgot to mention one thing. Okay. On the 22nd, I found out, sorry.
No.
May I? Is that all right?
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. You had your light on, so I didn't know if you wanted to say something. You're all right. On the 22nd, the hearing concluded at about 11:20. It was a 20-minute hearing. We weren't there, obviously. I found out later in the day that the continuance had been denied and that the appeal went on without us, and of course, and the Planning Commission, on the basis of what they know, denied it. Okay, fine. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon that day, I phoned Mr. Mara because I wanted a reconsideration. I thought that perhaps the Planning Commission really didn't understand clearly the reasons why we couldn't be there. Mr. Turner, I think Mr. Turner is over there. I haven't met you before, so. Mr. Turner returned that phone call at about 5:10 that day. After receiving the phone call, and we discussed the matter a little bit, I ended up sending a letter by email to Mr. Maurer, and I copied Mr. Turner and submitted a request for reconsideration. It's in your packet. To this day, I've not heard back from either of them, and I find that very unusual. You know, usually respected members of the bar get a return call either to say it was considered and denied, it wasn't considered at all, here's the reason we're not doing it, and here we are 8 weeks later and I haven't heard from anybody. And just to mention, the public notice that Mr. Moore referred to, in fact, was put in the Calaveras Enterprise the same day the letter went out, June 9th. The hearing was the 22nd. Now, I understand that it may be entirely possible for local residents to prepare materials and to appear on short notice because they don't have to travel far. I was in a very, very unusual circumstance. Mr. Alberts, and he could tell you himself, but I'll tell you for him, says that he basically can't speak in public. He gets stage fright. And so he wanted me to do the appeal. Even as a citizen, he wouldn't have been able to do the appeal. I simply couldn't be here. I couldn't rearrange my schedule. I couldn't ask the judge in San Diego to reschedule a 2.5-week trial. I couldn't do it. And so that's why we requested a reasonable continuance.
I'm going to ask you, since we're not in the hearing yet, we're on the continuance, I can ask this question because it might be new evidence, but do you currently have a crop in the ground?
Now we do. We didn't last year.
One of my personal concerns is that people like to come in and stand there and get a continuance because they get closer to harvesting and making their buck on this.
I'm prepared to have a hearing at the Planning Commission next week. I mean, as soon as they can squeeze us in. This is, as one of your planning commissioners noted, there was no intent to game the system here. I asked for a very short continuance. I've seen some of them, by the way. Continuances are granted. I've seen a few of them. Sometimes lawyers ask for continuances. I've seen a few of those. I've seen one continuance that went for 2 months. This was not that. We're prepared to go and make our case before the Planning Commission at the Planning Commission's earliest opportunity. My schedule is free for the next 3 weeks. I can be here on a day's notice. So this is simply that, look, I've been around a long time. I know you guys have too. This system is set up not for the convenience of the public officials. It's set up to afford the applicants due process. And all we're asking for is to be treated the same as anybody else. I simply want to present my case, Mr. Albert's case, to the Planning Commission. Whatever they do with it remains to be seen.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have in front of me the letter of appeal that was submitted on May the 30th by Mr. Alberts. Was he retained by counsel at the time?
No. You mean, was counsel retained at the time?
Yes.
I'm not clear that.
When was counsel, because I see Mr. Clark here, you're retained by counsel now?
I asked Mr. Clark to come in and assist me because he's local, and I wanted to make sure the papers were filed timely.
Okay.
And so Mr. Clark's involvement to this date has simply been, I have sent him the papers, and he filed them on Friday.
Well, the purpose of the question is to be sure that he did not have counsel retained at the time that he sent the letter in.
I was not retained at that
Okay,
time.
that would be the question. Would the information that is wanting to be presented today constitute new evidence before this board that would not have been presented to the Planning Commission?
Well, since we didn't present any evidence to the Planning Commission because we weren't there, the answer clearly is yes. And that's the whole point. We have the right material and additional material on earth moving, which Mr. Alberts, let me just say that, you know, I'm a lawyer. I make copies of everything. It's just my nature, you know. In fact, I scan everything now and keep it on my laptop in addition to making copies. On June 29th of last year, when he was at in this, I guess it was next door, where all of these applications were being filed, he filed an application but never made a copy. He didn't have time. He didn't have access to a copying machine. He didn't find out that the picture that he had attached to the application was the wrong picture until he got the packet from the planning director with the aerial shots and everything. And that's when he realized that it was a mistake made.
Do you believe that the information that would be presented today would be sufficient to give us all of the information necessary to make a ruling?
Yes.
Knowing that, and knowing that this board has the right to overturn a planning commission, my question would be, why would you want to go back to the planning commission and not hear it today and get a final result?
I'm not aware that there's anything in the county code that permits the board to overturn the planning commission.
I would like to chime in on that because ultimately the board is the final appellate body. So certainly the board has the ability to overturn a planning commission decision. However, the code, as it relates to remanding back to the planning commission, relates to new evidence that was not presented during the planning commission hearing. So if new evidence is presented during a hearing to the board that the board feels is compelling and would ultimately or potentially alter the planning commission's decision, at that point the board has discretion. It's not required to remand it back to the planning commission.
So in other words, in this case, I don't think you have the power to overturn because it will be new evidence, simply because we weren't able to present the evidence at the planning commission. So
You've seen the presentation that
Yes.
the county is going to do, and you believe you've got evidence that was not presented at the planning commission that can, you know, for lack of a better term, beat this evidence.
Absolutely. I didn't come 400 miles on a
to
argue about a picture that's incorrect.
Staff seen that evidence?
Well, if they haven't seen it yet because I gave it to you.
I mean,
My job here was to file an appeal to the board. It's all in the packet here. I can simply almost hand this packet over to the planning commission at this point and schedule a hearing.
Board Chair, I would just like to remind everyone that that has in fact been presented to the planning department. They do have a copy of it when it was filed with the county. A copy of it was presented to the planning department. For procedural issues, I did want to at least make the board aware as it relates to continuances. Parties are not entitled to a continuance by right. As you are aware, and you've heard many requests for continuances, it's based on good cause. And good cause is based on what is presented to the hearing body as to justify the continuance. Many times when counsel is not present or able to, they do at least have a substitute counsel present to argue the continuance, but that is certainly not required if sufficient information is submitted to the body in the request for a continuance, any written request. So for purposes of this bifurcated proceeding, the board really needs to be considering whether there was sufficient information presented to the planning commission that would justify good cause to continue the matter or not.
Okay. Thank you, counsel. Mr. Mauer, is there anything you want to contribute to this discussion right now?
I have nothing else to add. I didn't remember any of my correspondence with counsel here. However, I went back and read it this morning, and one of the emails I did send him cited 17.98.
Mr. Turner, I'm going to ask you to speak right into that microphone.
Certainly. Yeah, one of the email I did send him cited 17.98.070B, which, as Ms. Stedfield was just pointing out, allows the board to, upon review of new and additional evidence, remand it back to the board. So if he made his presentation today and you were found it so compelling that you thought the commission should rehear it, you certainly could. And I thought I'd just point out also that the council just said that he has plants in the ground now, but didn't have them last year. And if he didn't have plants in the ground last season, how could he have had plants in the ground prior to May 10th or been cultivating prior to May 10th? So it just seems peculiar to me. In any case, that's just what I wanted to point out.
Okay, so I can respond to that because I didn't want to be confusing. We did have plants that were going to go into, well, not me, Cali Farms. By the time the growing season started, the plants were put out, they died. They elected not to replant. We actually decided that we might go in-house. I actually ordered a greenhouse. It is sitting out in the field. We haven't constructed it yet. That's the reason there weren't plants. This year, there are plants. So I don't want to be confused about that. Secondly, what Mr. Turner is pointing out is exactly what your counsel and I have been discussing, 070. When I emailed him that day, he said to me, and you read the email, traffic is in here, and I'm not faulting him. He said exactly what it is, that the board grants continuances or don't grant continuances. He pointed out to me that I might have the opportunity to re-argue the whole case before the board. But what we're looking at here, and I understand where you're going with this, especially Supervisor Mills, if we're going to have a substantive hearing, and the only thing that you can do with it is kick it back to the Planning Commission to have another substantive hearing, that means we're going to have two substantive hearings on the same evidence. I don't see the point to that. I mean, why repeat the process twice and then have the Planning Commission kick it back here, and then we'll have a third substantive hearing on the evidence? I think the prudent thing to do, and all I'm asking for is I will work with Mr. Maurer or whoever does the scheduling for the Planning Commission, and we'll have this on in a week or two, and hopefully we won't have to come back here. I believe strongly we won't have to come back here.
Board Chair, I am curious, just procedurally, the information that you provided or submitted on behalf of the appeal to the board, was that all part of the appeal to the Planning Commission? So written, it was provided to the Planning Commission?
There was never anything filed with the Planning Commission because we filed a request for continuance.
Right, when the request for the appeal to be set, was anything submitted at the time of the request?
The appeal to the board?
No, the Planning Commission. When the appellant filed the appeal to have a hearing set in front of the Planning Commission, was anything submitted written?
No, not at that time, because we were waiting for a hearing date.
Counsel, so as I understand this, at your appeals hearing, no one attended.
We couldn't be there.
I understand.
Right.
And there was no evidence presented on behalf of the appellant or counsel.
Correct. The Planning Commission.
And he wasn't represented at that time?
Correct. The Planning Commission held an appeal,
So
held a hearing
actually, the
in
only
abstention.
information used for the appeals hearing on behalf of the Planning Commission was the evidence presented by staff.
Correct.
Is that the situation?
Correct.
You agree with that, staff?
Yes, it's true that no one was there representing the appellant.
Was there any evidence presented at that hearing, if you will, other than the staff position?
No, there was not.
Okay, so it's accurate in my assumption then?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
So continuing that point, then the evidence, sir, that you are wanting to present today is new information that the Planning Commission never had a chance to see.
Correct. That's the whole point.
Any further right now, Counsel?
I think I've said everything that I need to say.
All right.
Sorry. And you've seen our evidence, and you really sincerely believe.
Okay, so the evidence that the county used was the picture that was inadvertently placed in the packet by Mr. Alberts and a couple aerial shots that they took. One of the aerial shots actually proves my point. And if allowed to present that, I can present that to the Planning Commission. They will be persuaded.
And we're not just gaming this to continue on to harvest.
I assure you, I'm a seasoned lawyer. I don't take cases that I can't win. But beside the fact that my goal here is to have Mr. Alberts have, so to speak, his day in court, which was entitled to. I wouldn't be asking for it if I didn't think that we would succeed on the merits and that we wouldn't have to come back here.
Okay.
thank you for your opening statement. So I'm going to open this up to public comment. Is there any public comment?
Bill McManus. I'm more than just a casual observer of a lot of these appeals and at the Planning Commission and here at the board. Some of them are, pretty creative to delay, use the time intervals, marching towards a harvest time where it does them the most good. It's obvious that that happens. I'm not saying it happens in every case. This is a little bit more unusual in the fact that we want to go over and start the whole thing over again, take it back to the Planning Commission, where someone is quite certain that if they hear the new evidence that hasn't been seen, that the Planning Commission is going to change their mind and we won't ever have to do this again on this particular case. It seems to me like this is kind of gaming the system a little bit. We've seen attorneys not show up and nothing happens. Citizens are waiting in the audience where they've been waiting all day. They've put in the effort to be there to have their side represented. People who have the most at risk, the growers, don't seem to put in that effort to have someone here to protect their financial interest as they describe it. And so it seems to me that this is, I won't say a deception, but in almost every case that you get, fraud and misleading information, that box is almost always checked. And it just seems like, this is not the way it's supposed to happen, that the Planning Commission does their job. I've been there. Sometimes it's involved, sometimes there's a lot of dispute going on, but they always seem to get the job done. And when it comes to you, I don't know that there's been any really flawed cases, except for one, where the Board of Supervisors has overturned them. They've done their job. It's not up to the Planning Department to make sure that an attorney has information that he's, hasn't submitted yet, claims that it's new or claims that it's different, and all of a sudden this is going to change everything. This is not the way to instill confidence in the system for citizens to look at it and say, would I be able to get away with that? If I had some sort of code compliance complaint, could I game the system like that? I guess if you have enough money, you can, but that's not the point. The point is the Planning Commission has done their job, and they've issued their recommendation, and it's eventually made its way here, and now you're being asked to kick it back and start it all over again. What is going to change? Are the photographs going to change? Is the deception, is the misleading information going to change that was identified by the Planning Commission? I don't think so. You're just going to hear the same story all over again. But that's going to be probably 2 months down the line by the time it goes back to the Planning Commission, gets scheduled for a hearing. Whatever happens, happens. I'm not so sure that the Planning Commission is going to change their mind. And then you're going to wait another 15 days, and then it's going to be back to the Board of Supervisors again. And we don't know what tail is going to try to force you back to keep going through this repetitive process. My confidence, I don't always agree with the Planning Commission. I don't always agree with the board. But I know that they do their best. I've seen the evidence that's presented. It makes sense to me. I've seen the deceptions. I've seen all sorts of stuff there. And, you just can't keep doing these things over and over again, hoping somehow to get some sort of trick deal going where you eventually win. So anyway, I'd just like to see the Planning Commission's information presented, the board consider it, and get this thing over with. They just go on forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stopper?
I usually try not to speak on these things, but there's definitely confusion in between the court process and administrative hearing as we move forward in a lot of these cases. From my experience last year working through this, they did ask for a continuance. They didn't receive notification that their continuance was denied. So at that time, there's an assumption that they had a continuance. Either way, communication should have been presented to them. Look, we're not continuing, so you need to have someone show up, whether it be you representation, or whatever else. Moving forward, keep in mind due process on your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'd just like to respond to an earlier comment when you say, I'm not saying there's deception, and then say several times afterwards, there's deception. That doesn't really wash from my perspective. I think it doesn't hurt to kick it back to planning, let them have their hearing, and have their due process. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, it's public comment.
I didn't see anybody else.
I'll let you know when you're able to speak. Thank you. Any further public comment? I have a question. Mr. Maurer, do we have any documentation of the denial of the continuance?
It would be in the minutes of the planning commission.
Okay, so we have no no letter, no notification, no email sent to the appellant?
The request for continuance was submitted after we had noticed it, so we had to have it on the agenda. We have left that decision up to the planning commission because we've already been noticed and the public's already been noticed, so we hold the hearing and the commission can then decide whether to continue or not at that point.
All right, thank you.
Board Chair, I would just like for the record to be clear that the Planning Commission procedures do address continuances, and it expressly states that public hearings and planning commission deliberations may be continued to a future meeting at the discretion of the planning commissioners. So typically any request for continuance is not determined to be granted by staff in order to communicate that to an appellant in advance, because ultimately the decision of whether the continuance is granted or not is heard by the body.
That's where I was going with that. Okay, thank you.
I do have a
Supervisor
question.
Mills?
Mr. Trimmer, are you representing Mr. Albers?
I represent the Cali Farms Collective, which is Mr. Albert's collective, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Could I just briefly respond to Mr.
Sure.
McManus's
Go right ahead,
remarks?
sir.
And I'm going to make this real brief. My understanding is that when the planning director reviews an application and a photograph doesn't appear to be on the right parcel, that they automatically check the box that says false and misleading. There was no intent here to be false and misleading. Mr. Alberts put the wrong picture in. Secondly, I don't know how to respond to, I should temper my response to people who don't appreciate that this is not, timing is one thing. If we had been granted the continuance, we would have already had the hearing at the Planning Commission. This was, in fact, I'm not happy that we're first standing here today arguing about this some 7 weeks later when we were prepared to go to the Planning Commission anytime after July 15th, and the letter said that. It would have been a very short continuance. And at this point, as I say, I'm prepared to come back up here on 2 days' notice for a hearing. Now, I don't know what their schedule is. I think they hear 4 appeals in a session. I don't think they hear more than that. Sometimes they do 2 a day. Believe me, we're ready to go. I mean, we spent a lot of time on this. And as I said, if I didn't think we prevail on the merits, I wouldn't be here. We would go right to I wouldn't even represent them. I mean, that's not my style.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your consideration.
Any further comment by staff? I'm going to close the hearing then. I'll bring it back for the issue of the continuance. Any comment, deliberation by the board? Seeing none, any deliberation by staff? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, of course, we've got to think out loud. That's what we're paid to do. I'm very concerned about what new or compelling information that the Planning Commission did not see that would drive this back to them to make a decision on. And I'm not at liberty to really figure that out. That's the concern.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills.
I shared Supervisor Mills' concern. I mean, I'm curious to anybody else what's in that packet, but, So I'm wondering, I want to make sure everybody gets their fair day in court and gets heard. We've never, to my knowledge, we've never overturned a ruling by the Planning Commission on cannabis. We've never, have we overturned one?
Yes, this board didn't, but previous board did.
This board did it, though.
I think we're two, right?
I think there have been two.
The prior board did, but this board is not. We haven't really taken on the whole issue of sending anything back yet, though. So that is a new realm for us. Obviously, my concerns are known. I asked them. Mr. Alberts, I assume you're a local gentleman?
52 years.
52 years. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you. I have also some concerns. One, on the lines of due process, and other, on the ability to have your day in court. I'm kind of torn between both those issues right now. Due process to me is the entire process. An understanding of how the process works, and if you don't have that understanding, you seek that professional advice, or you find out for yourself. And that's where my dilemma comes in. I think the interpretation of due process is not left to what an individual thinks. It's what the court decides what it's going to be. Unfortunately, we're that court right now. I don't think we have a violation of due process here, but I have concerns about having your day in court. So, having said that, and confusing everybody, I'll call for a motion on the continuation, bifurcation of this particular proceeding. Is there a motion?
One question, Mr. Chair. There are three of us. What do we have to have unanimous and everything?
Yes.
Yes.
In order for anything to pass, it has to be 3 votes in order to pass something.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to continue it.
I have a motion by Supervisor Garamendi.
Excuse me.
Board Chair, I just
Send
want...
it back to...
Hold on.
I just want to make sure that the record is clear what the motion is. Is it to remand it back to the Planning Commission to actually have a full hearing at the Planning Commission level? Or is it to uphold the Planning Commission's denial of the request for continuance?
My motion is to send it back to the Planning Commission for a full hearing. I have great faith in that board. They seem to be do well.
Okay, do we understand the motion?
And if we don't get 3 votes to do that, the Planning Commission stands and the denial.
The continuance, we're voting on the continuance.
On the continuance, yeah.
Right,
stands.
Council?
On whether the board concurs with the Planning Commission's denial for the request for continuance.
Correct.
I was... Say it again, Councilor.
I know that's a bit wordy. Okay, so what is, the motion before you is to remand it back to the Planning Commission, essentially because the Planning Commission denied the request for continuance, you feel that they need to have a full hearing at the Planning Commission level.
Yes.
So you are remanding it back to the Planning Commission. You would essentially be overturning the Planning Commission's decision to deny the request for continuance and remand it back for a full hearing to the Commission.
Yes.
Does that make sense? I'm just making sure that I know it gets convoluted.
Now, I want to make sure I'm clear. That's what your motion...
I'm saying send it back to Planning Commission. I'd like to have them look at the data, the evidence.
Understand the motion? Looking for a second?
Yeah, it's the first time we've done this. And it's really difficult because we have heard cases where people have not presented here.
Right.
And made our decisions based upon lack of presentation. In this case, we have somebody who is standing before us. And the information is something that the Planning Commission did not hear, so therefore we could not rule on it even if we did move forward today. So with that, I'd have to second your motion.
Public comment? No public comment? I'll bring it back for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 3, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
You are the first, sir, for this board.
I've been accused of that before. I appreciate your indulgence, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Certainly hope.
I hope I won't have to see you again.
That was tough.
It was.
Sorry.
I was genuine. I'll be honest. I was genuine. Okay, we're back in session. Madam Clerk.
Okay, so I would like to do the report out from the closed session at lunchtime. It was item 3 from the closed session agenda, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation, 1 case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. There was no reportable action.
Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go into supervisor reporting out, we'll go back into our public speaking session. We're going to continue this after our 30-minute limit. And you have 3 minutes, sir.
I know. I see a new thing here.
Time's going.
2:58. I only have a minute, so let's just wait here for a little bit. I'm having a bad day today. I had 2 Coca-Colas yesterday, and I just can't handle that. Sugar and caffeine. And a pretty blonde attorney peed me off today, and it wasn't Megan. So that's a surprise, right? And I won't tell you about what it is, but somebody adopted a child without telling me. It happens. What I would like to talk to you today about is, let's come up with something, because I was just out picking up a motorcycle and decided to stop in and say hello to everybody. We can talk about marijuana a little bit and my beliefs on marijuana. As you know, I was dramatically negatively impacted by marijuana over the past 2 years, but it's not that but that didn't affect me to the point where I'm completely closed off from the idea of having some form of regulation. And the reason is that a lot of these people were here long before the rush. A lot of these people were here long before County Council Stedfield. And those people, by and large, did a good job under 215. They kept out of the hair of other people and did not negatively impact the environment or the community. So, in order to be fair to those people, in order not to take a reprisal, an action of a punitive action against what ostensibly are innocent people, we have to find a way to not punish them. And a complete ban would punish those people. The dispensaries did quite a good job in Calaveras County, and they have not had a huge negative impact on the county. We haven't seen police cars in front of there. We haven't seen huge robberies, guns flailed about. So I would like you to take that into consideration when you have your ban. Call it a ban, but have some leeway in the people you do. That you just have some leeway and try to help the people that have not done you any harm. So have 7 seconds, 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. My time's up. Come on, dude.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Take care, everybody.
Good afternoon. Vivian Sechu, District 1. In recent weeks, it has become public knowledge by county staff's own admission that the Cannabis Registration Fund has been misused and misappropriated. We have to say that we are not surprised at all, as it has been our absolute conviction for quite some time now that these practices of funds misappropriation and commingling have been a regular way of conducting business here in our county. In one of our past speeches, we made a specific remark in the hope for a full state audit in order to structurally uncover all of these financial mismanagement issues and hopefully move us forward with the required county leadership and process changes that our community strongly deserves. Obviously, the state must have been watching our county for quite some time now, and we do hope that someone somewhere at the state level has been watching the Board of Supervisor meetings of the past few months. As a business community, we have been fighting for a long time to earn a place at the table of the law-abiding and tax-paying business community. If and when we shall finally win that battle and align ourselves with the rest of the state, many states across the nation, and many nations across the world, we would like to think that our tax money would be well managed and put to the best possible use for our community. Today, this does not seem to be the case, and therefore, yes, we welcome a state audit in the hope that the rampant financial management misconduct, which extends beyond the cannabis fund and which has been afflicting our county for so long, will finally be brought to a long overdue end. In conclusion, we leave you with this food for thought. The auditor controller owns the budget control process. Therefore, if a certain budget has been misspent, misused, and/or misappropriated, that means the required control mechanisms were not in place or did not trigger. The auditor controller can shift blame as much as she wants onto the sheriff's office, even onto the CAO, the Board of Supervisors, and other department heads. But in all actuality, the auditor controller is the control gatekeeper, and therefore the responsible party for monitoring, controlling, and preventing the misuse, misappropriation of funds, as it is her duty to vet all financial requests and transactions. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further public comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, this is the time for the board members to report on meetings attended on behalf of the county and to carry out their duties as a county supervisor.
Okay. Who'd like to go first? Supervisor Mills.
As is usual, I've got a list. July 25th, Tuesday, attended Utica Water and Power meeting, reviewed the final budget, and the REMAT program is going forward, and this will ease the financial pressures on the City of Angels Camp and Union Public Utilities District. July 26th, staff attended the meeting where they had the first female plant operator retire at CCWD, and a presentation from HDR on the financial analysis of the district. I had a fact-finding meeting with a federal representative. On Thursday, the 27th, staff attended a planning commission meeting. I also attended for the last half, discussed a pending ban ordinance with my District 4 planning commissioner. Attended the Treasury Oversight Committee review of the investment portfolio. We're showing a 2% stable growth over the last 10 years. It's actually quite remarkable. Attended the career fair at Mark Twain Medical Center, hosted by Chamber of Commerce and Dignity Health. July 28th, Friday, met with persons interested in the economic development position within the county to discuss the vision and what partnerships would be needed. August 1st, Tuesday, attended the ACBA Coffee Talk Tuesday with nearly 30 people from various businesses in attendance. I think that was the largest one that they've had. There's an announcement of a pending expansion of the Best Western Hotel, doubling in size in Angels Camp, the construction of a Dollar General store there, and the status of the Utica Hotel as a keystone to the downtown business. The lower section will be open before Christmas, which will be really a great thing for that area. Attended the Angel City Council meeting, review of their budget and the city response to the grand jury report. August 2nd, Wednesday, attended Mountain County's Water Association presentation by the Delta Stewardship Council on the Bay Delta Plan. Several state water board members were in attendance, where we reminded them of the need to include remediation of environmental damage in the water code. And interesting, Gary Lepner, who is the chief of the North Central region, was in attendance and said that they're in the process of working on Title II of the state water code. Primary issue there is to ensure that all agencies are sharing information on sites and level of damage. Staff attended the Chamber of Commerce Good Morning Calaveras, Speaker David Thaney with Motherlode Job Training, attended Council of Governments meeting to receive a presentation on the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan. Great discussion between the city, the county, and Caltrans over the options on Highway 49 south of the city and the potential bypass options and parking near 49 and 4 at the lights. We're getting a lot of truck traffic parking in there now, which is affecting traffic flow. August 3rd, Thursday, met with Tuolumne County Supervisor Carl Rodefer, representing the south shore of Lake Tulloch, CEO Craig Pedro, and their Assistant Community Development Director on how the counties can work together in land use matters on the lake, and how we can deal with marine safety reimbursement and fire department reimbursement, the traffic pressures around the bridge, public access issues, and many other common points. That was the first serious discussion that these two counties have had, as they can recall, in over 30 years. The board needs to assign a representative to the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority as part of our creation of a GSA here. Meetings are held monthly in Stockton. In fact, there's one tomorrow morning that I will be going to. Most of the members are from that area, so it's very easy for them, but we need to be appointing someone hopefully at their next session to represent Calaveras County. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. Supervisor Garamendi?
Thank you. Supervisor Mills, what was the last committee that we need to appoint somebody to? I'm sorry.
It's the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority.
Gotcha.
It's part of that GSA that we did. I've been attending those meetings since January.
Thank you. I have been dealing with a ton of constituent issues, primarily around the Butte Fire insurance, duplication of benefits issue, cannabis, and local roads and crime. It's a busy time in District 2, and everybody's got my cell phone number. So we've been trying to help out a lot of our citizens. I attended a meeting for the Upper McCalamy River Watershed Association, UMRA, which is always a really good group, and we're making progress with some of our major projects, including watershed restoration up on Pumpkin Hollow, which is really interesting. Several briefings with Health and Human Services. We discussed community needs assessment for District 2, as well as some of their housing programs and other programs that they have underway. It's an impressive group. We've got some other health issues that we're going to be taking on upcountry in the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot to look forward to there, and to figure out how we work with the community closely. Attended a mental health board meeting, which deals with mental health of our community. I think it's a very important committee. We are always looking for more people to join or attend. If there's very few people or families in the world that don't have some interaction with mental health, and so I encourage this community to be supportive of this group. And then I attended several meetings with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, where we talked about sustainable funding, some of the park bond monies that are going, park bond issues that are going, and water bond issues that are going forward in the Senate and Assembly, State of California, so that we make sure that the Central Sierra and the foothills and mountains are well represented, so that we get a piece of the pie for watershed restoration when these big water projects go through. So overall, it was very productive last couple of weeks, but pretty much a blur. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Supervisor Garamendi. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've returned from Columbus, Ohio, live and well. I'd like to talk a little bit about NACO. This was the annual convention, and NACO is the National Association of Counties on a national basis. We're very proud to say that California is what's called a 100% state. That means that every county is a member of NACO. NACO offers several benefits to the counties. One most important to us here is the insurance program. We also have participation in CSAC, California State Association of Counties, and we receive benefits from them by being a member of that organization. But let's get back to NACO. This is our really active second year of participating with NACO. Meeting with all the county supervisors that represent the nation, you get a variety of what's happening. And I don't know if it's honored, but I must state that they know where Calaveras County is nationwide, for good reasons and for bad. I was sought out no less than 20 supervisors from around the country asking what our positions on marijuana was, and they're all looking towards some type of solution. I attended several workshops, but let's talk about the marijuana issue. Two of the workshops I attended there was a panel of 4 counties dealing with the marijuana issue, and surprisingly enough, they're all from California. There was a variety of questions being presented, but the gist of the whole workshop was how were they dealing with the problems that they're seeing in Colorado. We had a representative from Colorado counties on that panel also, for a total of 5. And surprisingly enough, we had Humboldt County on the panel. We had some other counties, those located on the coast. But the bottom line is they're all looking at seeing what Calaveras is going to do. That was brought to my attention by several people. They had a workshop also on the marijuana regulation proceedings as it varies throughout the entire nation. Believe me, folks, that they're just all over the board, all over the board. I attended workshops and meetings with our land use. I got an experience with the different counties, supervisors, how they deal from your farming, agricultural, to your urban, to your suburban, and the different problems facing them, of course, with the different resources. Every workshop I attended, I was able to grab something out of. Some good, some bad. But the most important thing we did, and I say we, is on a nationwide level, we had representation for rural counties. Part of the workshops and part of the committees that I attended there was the Rural County Caucus. And folks, these groups are having the same problems that we're seeing right here in Calaveras County. We talked to people that have been affected by fire, been affected by flood, been affected by economic depression problems. So we're not alone. We're not alone. We attended some other events where we were able to meet folks through what's called a vendor display area. And there was no less than 100 vendors there, dealing from everywhere from police vehicles to insurance programs to data management systems to environmental issues, things of that sort. Very interesting, and we took something back from that. Let's see if we can make some of that stuff work for our county. In addition to that, after coming back, spent 5 days at Columbus, Ohio. Very beautiful city. By the way, it was the biggest city in the state of Ohio, is Columbus. And they're going through a very extensive redevelopment program, and it's very successful, very successful. Hopefully we can start something like that in our county here in the very near future. Got that covered. I attended a workshop back in there about, and it's kind of a unique title, Gaining Citizen Buy-in. And that was probably one of the most important workshops I attended because it gave me a different view. It gave me the opportunity to see the variables when we're trying to educate our constituents on certain aspects or certain issues that we may or may not agree with. And it's not a sales job. It was a different way of looking at things, maybe looking through our citizens' eyes, looking through our constituents' eyes, seeing how they interpret a representative such as us and the supervisors, and also our department heads. I took something back from that. Hopefully we can make that work too. I don't know, let's see how good I am at that. Our workforce development, we did a small workshop on that. Once again, these are all issues that we're facing in Calaveras County. We're talking about our economic development program coming up. It kind of dovetails into the committees that all of our supervisors sit on. mental health, the water boards, things of that sort. We attended our general sessions, and believe me, it was like a political party with excellent videos, presentation, good presentation by all members. In our general session, we had a voting session, which Calaveras County has 2 votes because of our participation, even though we only sent 1 representative back there. And once again, I'm proud to say that California is the largest state representative for NACO, having what's called the 100% participation. I look forward to next convention that's going to be held in Tennessee. Depending on our economic status, we'll see if we'll go. Back on a local level, excuse me as I go through my deal. I was able to participate in the California State Assessors Convention held right here in Murphys in District 3. Held at the Ironstone. I was actually honored to have the open welcoming speech through our assessor, Leslie Davis. Had great representation there. Good groups, a chance to meet with other assessors from our local surrounding counties and all the way through the state. They had, I believe, 40 counties represented there. So that was a very good thing. And I was proud to say that our assessor's office, matter of fact, our assessor was the hosting representative, and she did a very fine job. She showed off Calaveras County pretty well. I also attended Good Morning Calaveras from our Chamber of Commerce. Those folks are doing pretty good. I must also remind everybody that in September, I've been asked and honored to represent Calaveras County on the State of the County speech presentation. I'm working with CAO Lutz on that. I'd like to encourage everybody to attend that. It's a morning breakfast at the town hall. I'll give you the date here in a moment. But it's a chance in a nutshell. They only gave me 30 minutes, so I'm only going to be able to hit some really high spots. But the bottom line is that shows where our chamber's going. They're being progressive. They're doing things. They're putting Calaveras on a map along with our Visitors Bureau. We do have some other issues that we're talking about internally. Our closed sessions are very productive, but I want to do a shout out to our department heads and what's been going on recently. I think they've been doing a fine job. I think the board's been doing a job that's necessary, and we're making some tough decisions, but we're making some good decisions. So I want to compliment all of our board supervisors, especially our staff. I look forward to serving you as your supervisor and as your board chair. That's all I have. Any further comments? Staff, do you have comments? CAO Lutz? With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.